Okay, good morning, and I'm Sachin Ahuja, and it's my pleasure on behalf of UKSSB to welcome you to BritSpine 2025 here in Manchester. As far as I'm aware, there is no fire drills or anything. So if there's a fire, just run. No, just look for the exit, fire exit. Apart from that, I don't know of anything specific that's happening in the city, even tonight or tomorrow. From the BritSpine program point of view, the program's going to be recorded. So all your talks, what you say, not what you say, the talks will be recorded and will be uploaded onto the conference app and to the website in a few days' time. So I thought this is an opportunity for me to just go through the history of the spine societies in the UK. And I think that slide tells it all, but just quickly run through. So the orthopedic spine surgery had a group of surgeons who used to meet up on a regular basis, but in 1990, they formed a formal structure, and they called it the British Orthopedic Spine Society. And already at this point, BSS and SBPR were affiliated societies with the BOA. But the Orthopedic Spine Society wasn't. SBNS already was in existence, as you know. The first British Orthopedic Spine Society was held in 1996, and Mike Sullivan was the first president of the so-called boss of British Spine Society. In 1999, in this very city in March, was the first BritSpine that was organized more than 25 years ago. And in 2000, BOSS changed its name to BAS. And in 2008, the separate entity, British Cervical Spine Society, merged with BAS to become the biggest spine surgery society in our country. But at the same time, as you can see, till all that was evolving, BritSpine was already in existence, and BritSpine was well on its way. And over the past 25 years, we've been through different regions, different centers, starting with Birmingham, then Nottingham, Cardiff. Some of my colleagues who are here who helped organize the meeting, and we remember it very fondly, and hope those who had attended would remember it as well, like every other BritSpine. 2008 was Belfast, then Liverpool. 2012 was in Newcastle. 2014, Warwick, in the University of Warwick campus, campus BritSpine in a way. 2016 was Nottingham, 18 Leeds, and 2020, we all know what happened. And then we came back stronger post-COVID in Glasgow with the highest attendance we've ever had for BritSpine, with high number of abstracts, attendees, you name it. And I think long may it progress and long may it last, because we're seeing the same this year as well, with more abstracts, more attendees. So it's great to mingle with people from different backgrounds who look after patients with spinal problems, surgeons, non-surgeons, researchers, everybody. So it's a great opportunity for us to collaborate, and that's exactly what UKSSB was set up for. And the formal structure for UKSSB was put together in 2012 when the constituent societies, BAS, BSS, SBPR, BASCUS got involved. The National Back Pain Pathway was there, but it's become a more formal structure. The National Spine Network, which has grown and grown and grown, and long may it last, because it's really flourished under the stewardship of Dermot and Jim Greenwood. And we are affiliated with the BOA, so we've got representation from BOA, we've got representation from SBNS, and Jeremy Fairbank was the first chair of UKSSB, who handed over to Alistair Sterling, and then Patrick Statham, who is responsible for roping me in. I blame him for that. And then I blame my board colleagues and exec members who made me stay on for another year when I should have actually finished last year. We've advertised. Unfortunately, we did not have any applicants for the chair. Maybe I've made the job look too difficult. It isn't. If I can do it, anybody can. So we are advertising again. So please, I hope not him, but I'm sure one of you can step in and do the job so that I can hand over and pass on the baton to the next person. So coming back to BritSpine 2025, which already kickstarted yesterday with an excellent surgeons masterclass, which Girish and Ed Bailey put together. And having spoken to the attendees, the feedback was really good, so well done to them. Same to Rohit Shetty. I don't know why he's put my name next to it. Rohit did all the hard work to set up the industry masterclass, and that was very well attended and very well received, having spoken to the attendees from that meeting as well. And there was a small meeting going on at the same time where very few people attending the National Spine Network meeting. I'm telling you, it was amazing to see more than 100 people sat there. And it's credit to them, what they've put together, and credit to the team for putting up a great show. So well done, National Spine Network. It was really heartening to see how many people were there attending the meeting. The program, as usual, has been put together by a team. So it's not just one person or the UKSSB exec. It is the team with representation from each society. So BAS put forth Aprajay, who's the current president, and Rajat Verma, who's the incoming president and the local host. Ed Bailey from British Scoliosis Society, Steve Vogel from SBPR, Jim Greenwood, National Spine Network, and Rohit Bide from Baskis. I would like to take time to thank them for putting up with me, evenings, late evenings, going through the meeting, with the program, and at the heart of it, trying to make sure that they put content together which helps their membership, but at the same time, when we come together, makes it a bit collaborative so that it appeals to everybody. Obviously, we can't be purely surgical or purely non-surgical when we have the plenary sessions here. So it is a bit of a significant task for the program committee to make sure that it's appealing and it's something that fulfills everybody's learning objectives. And this is how we work day to day anyway. So what different when we come together and work on this platform? Thanks to the UKSSB exec, Rohit Shetty, the UKSSB secretary, Mark Thomas, UKSSB treasurer, and thanks, Mark, because Mark finishes his tenure. Thank you very much for all your hard work that you put in to keep us afloat. Frankly speaking, afloat is the correct term for it to an extent. And thank you very much to Henry Dodds, who's our executive support manager. And most of you know Henry. Henry is absolutely the lifeline or the spine of all the spine societies in UKSSB, holding us all together. And he's been stellar for us. So thank you, Henry, for all his hard work that he's put forth for this meeting, for managing, coordinating everything. Unfortunately, Henry can't be here for this event. Henry's unwell, so we wish him a speedy recovery. Although he's been on the phone, he's been reaching out on emails, text messages, so thanks again. So he's not stopped working, but unfortunately can't be here in person. I would like to thank the invited faculty, national and international. Some of you are here, some of you will be arriving in the next few days. I'm sure there's lots to learn, having heard each member who's put forth the person to speak. I've heard some really good things, so I really look forward to hearing about their work, their experience, and share their knowledge with us so that we can improve and learn. One faculty member that I would like to talk about is Rajiv Sethi. Rajiv is a spine surgeon based in Seattle. He was a keynote speaker. I say was. Unfortunately, Rajiv can't make it. He had to pull out last minute, and he was quite unhappy about it, but there's no way he could have come over. He's been extremely unwell, and due to health reasons, he could not come. This just happened virtually a few days ago. So we wish him speedy recovery. And unfortunately, Rajiv can't be here. And those of you who've been to BAS 2015 in Bath, you would have heard Rajiv speak. He's a great speaker. So we had to fill a big void in the various sessions that Rajiv was going to help us out with. And the first one is straight after my welcome address is the AI talk. We were quite keen to embrace AI. I think that's the right term for it. And Rajiv has done a lot of work on AI, and we thought he'll contribute very well. And then we had to fill the slot in, and I can say we've been very lucky. We landed. We've got an excellent speaker to fill in. And thanks to Manoj Ramchandran. Manoj is a pediatric orthopedic surgeon based at Royal London. He's done a lot of work on AI. I have heard him speak, and I can guarantee you, he won't let you down. You'll have to fasten your seatbelts and listen to what he has to say. It is incredible, the work that he's done. So there's a lot of learning from there, and thanks, Manoj, for stepping in to help us out. And same with regards the next session, we had a talk later today on navigation, talking about a debate with regards various modalities of navigation, which Pat Kiley, our invited faculty from Dublin, and Rajiv are going to participate in. So we look local, Liverpool. Sorry, Liverpool, what happened last night, really sad. But Martin, I am sad. Martin stepped in, and Martin will, I'm sure, is a very able replacement. There's a talk tomorrow on role of physiotherapy in patients with spine stenosis, and the surgical talk was going to be delivered by Rajiv Sethi. And Ashley Cole, who doesn't need any introduction, has kindly stepped in to help us out. So thanks, Ashley, for that. On Friday, we had a talk on safety in spine surgery. As I said, Rajiv does a good talk on safety in spine surgery. He's done a lot of work on it, but we had to fill the gap, and we've been very lucky. We didn't have to go far. We could stay local. And Rajat Verma and Michelle Angus have kindly stepped in. And for what they've put together, I can see that each one of us from different backgrounds would find the talk extremely useful. I can guarantee you that. So we managed to find able replacements. Maybe some of them may be better than what we had. I don't, no disrespect to anybody. But that's what I believe for certain things. And what happens, happens for good, and hope Rajiv recovers quickly. We have international collaboration with the European Spine Society and USAB. Jarko is here, who's the chair of USAB. Welcome, Jarko. We have this arrangement with Eurospine, where the best paper from Eurospine is presented in a best of the best session for us. And same from BritSpine, the best paper gets presented at Eurospine, so the best paper from this year will be presented in Copenhagen later this year. We have collaborated with Eurospine over the years, and we've continued to do so. This year, Bas and Apraja especially have helped build up links with the Japanese Society for Spine Surgery, the Neurological Society of India, and the Korean Spine Society, who are delivering some sessions for us. So I think that will enhance what is available for us to understand, learn. The conference dinner, based on the feedback, is slightly different this year. It's a bit more informal, not in a pub, but not far off. So not formal, no black tie event. We just want to make it a bit more informal so that we can interact, meet, talk, collaborate in a less formal manner with a street food setting, what the event managers set up for us for. And there was some of the feedback that we got from the previous conference dinners that can we not change it. So we've tried to do that. Hopefully this works, and if it works, that could be a model for the future. And as every meeting, our charity for the year, charity for this event is ORUK. ORUK is something that we work very closely with BAS PSS. They sponsor research funds and research fellowships with the surgical societies. So we are supporting ORUK this year. So I hope you all will be there tomorrow evening for the conference dinner and support a good cause and support ORUK. I know there's another event happening at the same time in the city. It may not be as good as this one, right? You know what I'm talking about, United playing Real Sociedad. For the industry, you walk through the industry when you came to this auditorium. Please make sure that you go to the stands. I think I've been told that on your event tab, you get a stamp, and if you get a stamp, you get something from if you collect the maximum number of stamps. But more importantly, without industry, we won't be able to hold a meeting like this. So please, can I just make a gentle request, go to the stands, meet up with our industry colleagues, small, big. And I'm sure they've got new tools, new toys, new wares, which will help our patients, so it's worth looking into. As usual, we are having a public engagement program tomorrow with Versus Arthritis, and if any of you would be interested in, come along, join us as a charitable organization. That's something that we do, and I think we should continue to support such sort of events. You may have seen The journal, the 5th edition of the Column and Chord, which has been published, it is online. And I can say, and thanks to Tim and his team, and I can honestly say year on year, the content is getting better and better and better. You got to read it to believe me. Henry's done a lot of work to get indexation, so it's on Scholastica. Hopefully now it will be on Google Scholar, and we'll have a DOI reference to it as well. So we're working on that. Gradually it's building, thanks to the team that have helped us put this together. And if there are any volunteers, please reach out to Henry or Tim directly to help us out with the journal. Please download the conference app, which has got all the information. And I would like to thank the event management team, Sarah Byrne and Helen, who worked tirelessly to make things run smoothly for us with the program. Extremely helpful and friendly. So if any queries, program-related, conference-related, you can reach out to them. They're always there to help us. So thanks very much to them. And again, I would like to thank Henry, who has helped coordinate the working of the board and the team with the event management team. So thanks to Henry again. Our digital savvy friends, if you're going to tweet, put something on LinkedIn, these are our handles. Please spread the word for all the good work that we're doing here. So I encourage you to do that. And one last final thing I would like to mention is, where do we go next after BritSpine? For BritSpine 2027, no biases. I didn't have much influence. It's the board's decision. And we're going to the where we should go, Wales. We're coming home. So next BritSpine is going to be in ICC Wales. And it'll be held in ICC Wales. So this is a unanimous decision by the board. So the next meeting is going to be 2027 ICC Wales. So at this point, I would like to thank everybody, the exec, the board, Henry, for helping me do what I have been able to achieve and do. Thank you. I finish this year, and I hand over my baton to the next person. So please apply. And hope you all have a fantastic meeting, and look forward to speaking to and connecting with everybody. Thank you very much. May I ask Aprajay to come and introduce our guest speaker, please?
Good morning, everyone. I'm sure you are looking forward to this 2.5, nearly 3 days of excellent meeting. And thanks, Sachin, to lead the program committee to organize this. AI is the buzzword now. Everybody is looking into it, knowing about it. And I can't present a better person than Professor Ramachandran to talk about this. He is a consultant pediatric orthopedic and trauma surgeon in Royal London Hospital in Bath. And he's written no fewer than 18 books and published more than 150 scientific papers. But not only that, he's doing all this academic work, he has really innovated immensely in the AI field and has co-founded many healthcare ventures, including Wiz AI. He holds multiple professorship, visiting professorship, including Stanford, as well as in Singapore. So without further ado, may I request you please to come and deliver your talk. Thank you so much.
Morning, everyone. My disclosures are I'm not a spine surgeon. I'm a pediatric orthopedic surgeon, but we have, is anyone here from the Royal London? Can you put your hands up? No one yet. They're all on a train. I know that. So Monty, Fadi, Raj, Aaron, Sai, they're all coming up. I'm going to be talking about something slightly different. So I'm going to tell you my journey to get into AI and why I think all of you should be spending as much time as possible, any of your spare time, thinking about this, because it's here and it's accelerating at such a fast pace that by the time you get to see what's happening right now, we're already 2-3 iterations ahead of everything that you're playing with on your phones, on the internet, anywhere. Just be aware of this. So my background is that I primarily operate on children with bone and joint problems, hip, knee, foot, and ankle, and I work at the Royal London. And this is my 19th year as a consultant there and professor. But in my spare time, about 16 years ago, I started to get interested in ventures. I started writing a bunch of books, some in orthopedics. And my wife said, all you need to do was write one Harry Potter, and instead you wrote a bunch of 18 books that hardly anyone reads. But anyway, I ended up setting a bunch of courses up, and we ended up selling a course company about 15 years ago. So I got into the idea of building something, making it work, and then selling it. And then we started an online portal called Pass the MRCS, because a lot of MRCS trainees used to pass the exam. And then about 15 years ago, I got into medical devices with 3D printing, a company called Auditorium, which made 3D printed braces, including for the spine, which is almost a same-day service. They're active in Canada and the US at the moment. So if you wanted a spinal brace for scoliosis in, say, neuromuscular children, you get it printed on the same day, 3D printed. I sat on the boards of various device companies like Orthopediatrics, who also have a spinal portfolio. And I think where my career kind of took off was I got involved very early in a startup out of Palo Alto in California called Pivot Medical that made hip arthroscopy devices. And I started really early with that company and went through rounds of funding and sold it to Stryker in 2013 as an exit. And that was an amazing time, just learning a lot about building a big company and selling it to a big medtech device company. And at that time, Silicon Valley was really taking off. And what's interesting about where we are, on the top right, you can see there's a set of blue buildings. That's the Royal London Hospital. This area in East London and Central London is called Silicon Roundabout. And around 10 years ago, Google set up there, Facebook, now Meta set up there, various other people set up there. And people started building startups there. And I got interested in various things from using Google Glass. I mean, no one uses Google Glass anymore, but if you're an early adopter, you want to try it and see if it helps your clinical practice. We built outcome scoring systems for hip surgery. We built clinical workflow, care coordination apps. So I got interested in various things, but what really changed in about 2015 was one technology, which is what I'm going to talk about now, which is AI. Now, this is a great chart. This is how long it takes for technology to be adopted. So you can look at the telephone, electricity, from no one using it to 100% of use in US households. And you can see that every technology that's come in over the last 100 years, the adoption rate has accelerated. It's become exponential. And we really are in the exponential age of AI. It's completely taken off in the last 10 years. It's been around for many, many years. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about AI. How many of you use AI in your everyday practice? Just put your hands up. How many use it for your clinical patients? Okay, interesting. The question is, what is AI? And it's a huge, broad topic, right? So it's been around since the 1950s, and it's just a way for computers to mimic human intelligence. And over time, we've started to learn to make computers better and better at predicting what an output should be, not just describing what it sees, but predicting. And recently, we've started using deep learning networks, which almost works like the neural network in the brain, to process images, text, video, anything that's thrown at it, and come out with a result. Now, a traditional computer, you put data in. So for example, I might ask it to do 2 times 2. You give it to a computer, give it the rule that it's a multiplication, and it gives you an output, 4. That's traditional programming. But with machine learning, you do something else. You give it the 2 and the 2, you give it the output, which is 4, and you ask it to learn the rule, and it learns over time that it's multiplying to get to 4. So it's a slightly different way. You've given it the output, and it learns the rule. And in machine learning, you can start by supervising this learning. So you feed it, say, apples, tell it these are apples, annotate it, and then over time, it starts to learn when it sees an apple, it is an apple. And that's how image recognition works. That's how your Google search works. It's very straightforward. Over time, you can make it unsupervised, but you need more data. You can show it apples, bananas, oranges, whatever, and it learns the rules, and it starts to learn that this is an apple, this is an orange, this is a banana, right? So in about 2015, Google had really got very, very good at neural networks. So it could take images, so say a photo of someone, say, I don't know, Taylor Swift, and show it multiple pictures of Taylor Swift, and it starts to look at all the different parts of her face, from the color, the contrast, the lines, the angles, and it starts to work out the features, and then eventually it puts all together and says, that's definitely Taylor Swift, or that's not Taylor Swift. Great. So in about 2015, we started looking at whether we could do that with imaging in healthcare. So one of the conditions I treat is dislocation of the hip, so hip dysplasia in newborn children, and we diagnosed that obviously with ultrasound scans at 6 weeks of age. And these are dynamic scans, and getting it always correct is very, very difficult. It's operator dependent. So we trained an algorithm to start seeing all the edges, the contrast, the shadows, and start working out where the acetabulum is, where the femoral head is, and slowly start saying, okay, this is the angle, the hip is in or the hip is out. And we published it in early 2016. And then, it's a long story, but the short of it was it took off at Stanford, where we presented it, and got some funding from Eric Schmidt, who at the time had stepped down as CEO of Google, to start building AI algorithms in healthcare. And what was interesting was we thought we were solving an important problem, which is dislocated hips in babies, but it wasn't an urgent problem, because if you pick up a dislocated hip or spinal stenosis, no one's going to die from it immediately. So if you're investing in a company like that, if you're a venture capitalist or someone who runs an investment fund, you're trying to work out whether, if you build this technology, which has never been done before in healthcare, will someone use it and will someone pay for it? Because it has to be sustainable as a business. So you have to build that value proposition. So we got a team together and actually started building various algorithms. And the one that really struck was stroke. And stroke is a condition, it's devastating, and particularly large strokes are a big clot in the brain. And you guys are spinal, right? So you're almost up here. So a large clot in the brain, in the middle cerebral artery, or a bleed, if they're large, you've got a 6-hour window where if you don't get that clot out or stop that bleed, every minute after that, 2 million brain cells are dying. It's devastating. And we knew from all the randomized controlled trials that were published in the early 2000s in the Lancet and the New England Journal that if you don't get that patient to the right person to take that clot out or stop that bleed, and there are lots of barriers to this. You have to turn up at your district general hospital, someone has to scan you, someone has to read that scan, someone has to pick up that diagnosis, send it to the referral center, the big stroke center, transfer the patient, and then someone goes in and takes the clot out or stops the bleed. If you don't do that, it's a big problem within the 6-hour window. We knew that 90% of patients don't get to the right person in that 6-hour window. So we built a system that takes CT scans and MRI scans straight off the CT scanner or MRI scanner as the patient's having the scan. So these are DICOM images. They go up to a secure cloud. Our deep learning algorithm, which we built for stroke, read it. And then if it picked up a positive stroke, would send the answer with the result to your phone, to the phone of the person who needs to know, who could be in the hospital 30 miles away. It could be a stroke interventional radiologist or a neurosurgeon in another hospital. They see it, and then you can communicate directly on there. So we built that. And I'm going to show you so we had to go through the FDA to show that this works and that it is viable and it won't miss a stroke and it will pick up as many strokes as possible. And then we started putting it to patients. So this is one of the first patients that had this with a devastating stroke, and The Economist filmed this once we got into that.
How many fingers you see? How many fingers? You give me a smile, big smile. Give me a big smile.
The Viz technology has a tremendous amount of data built in the system of where these arteries are, what these arteries should look like, and where there should be blood flow. And when there's interruption in that blood flow, it sends off an alert.
So the goal now is to get the clot out of the brain as quickly as we can. If we cannot get this clot out of the brain, that this whole area of brain that you see here in green, the whole area will be dead most likely. So, what we did in this case is use a smaller bore catheter to grab the clot. This is actually the culprit for all his symptoms, and now we have it outside the body, and we have full restoration of flow.
Hello, Dr. Devlin.
How are you doing there, sir?
Pretty good, how are you?
Good to see you.
Okay, I'll move this on. So then you have to prove that it works in as many patients as possible. So we had to run a bunch of studies all over the US to show that you picked up the diagnosis early, you got the patient transferred to the right stroke center quickly, and then you got into the groin and took the clot out, or got into the brain and stopped the bleed as quickly as possible. We then published a paper on 5,000 patients that had had this done and took it to CMS. And CMS is the Center for Medicare and Medicaid, to prove that this technology works, because you needed not just the FDA approval that you can use it, but then you need a reimbursement. You need someone to pay for it. And that happened in 2020. We got the first ever AI approvals for a code from the CMS, which is called an NTAP code, which is a new technology add-on payment, which meant that every time someone had a stroke and used that technology to treat that person, so pick up the stroke and treat that person, not only did they get paid for the stroke, but they got an additional $1,150 extra payment. So it incentivized them to use our technology, which was crazy. So then our adoption took off. We ended up partnering with Medtronic, who became our global distributor, and started putting it into, because for them it's very useful, because if you can get a patient to the right interventionalist within the right amount of time, then their devices will be used to take the clot out, right? Their stent retrievers, etc. So over the last, it's now 8 years. There's now 500 people working at the company. We have offices in San Francisco, Europe, in the Middle East. We picked up, I can't imagine how many numbers of strokes, all over the US. We're in about 1,800 hospitals in the US, which is just over a third of the US. And in some states, every hospital has our technology. We pick up a stroke, just stroke, every 13 seconds, automatically somewhere in some hospital. Chris, who's the CEO, so Chris trained as a neurosurgeon, was our co-founder, went to the US and never came back to practice because he still runs the company. He was named last year's in Time 100 AI. We presented at Davos earlier this year at the World Economic Forum. And then recently we signed a deal with Microsoft to put it into the back end of anywhere that Microsoft is used in any healthcare system. So it's pretty amazing. And then we moved on. We've now have 13 FDA clearances. So that stroke was the first one. We have FDA clearances for pulmonary embolism, aortic dissection, abdominal aortic aneurysm. So any time-sensitive condition that's image-dependent. And recently we moved into other areas. So this is for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, which is sudden death syndrome, which affects people like footballers and young, fit athletes. So in those hospitals that we're in, we screen all the EKGs, they call them in the US, but electrocardiograms, ECGs, and pick up hypertrophic cardiomyopathy if it exists, and they automatically get referred for an echocardiogram, and then a diagnosis is made and treated. And that was last August. So that was a bit of a crazy journey, and believe me, there have been lots of ups and downs. I'm just showing you mainly the ups. But it's incredible what you can do with AI. At a time when we started in 2016, that's when the company founded, no one believed that AI would be useful in healthcare, which is interesting. I'm going to talk to you about where we've got to, where we are now, and where we're going. So all this is kind of descriptive and predictive. So it sees an image. AI, you can train it to see an image and pick or a piece of text or video, and it will describe it analyzing past data and then try and predict outcomes. So what is the chance of you having a stroke? What's the chance of you not having a stroke? And if we look at orthopedics, so I'm an orthopedic surgeon, but I've ended up doing things outside of orthopedics. It's starting to get more and more used. So Glima have a trauma unit called Bone View Trauma, which picks up X-rays. It's really used in emergency departments by nurse practitioners and trainee doctors to pick up fractures, and it just runs automatically in the background. It's being used in the UK, and it's NICE approved. Radiobotics have one for picking up hip dysplasia. Again, not urgent, but important. And then we think about all kinds of data coming from parts of the body, not just visual data. So we've been talking really about X-rays and CT scans and MRIs. But the first smart implant that we use in orthopedics is this Canary, which was a partnership with Zimmer Biomet. And it's an implant that goes into your total knee replacement and emits data on usage, step counts, wear, etc. And that's in clinical practice at the moment. So data can be used at scale, big data. In spine specifically, there are algorithms that exist, particularly for the traumatic side of spine, so C-spine fractures, We have one at Viz. AI Doc is another company that does it. These are, again, important conditions, particularly in a polytrauma setting, that might be missed. What people are working on is automated. So I know there are at least 3 large healthcare systems in the US working on predictive analytics for scoliosis, so predicting progression of curve, needing either bracing or surgery fusion, and also predicting the implants that you might need to use by modeling the imaging and thinking what implants might go into that specific patient. So that stuff is happening right now. We use it in surgery, and there are multiple companies here. I'm not tied to any single one of them, but they all have different ways of taking data, visual and other data, in an operating room setting and navigating, helping you get to the right place and put the right implant in without any complications or reduce the complications. We use it post-op. And the 2 big companies in the US, they haven't quite got here yet, are Sword Health and Hinge Health. That's taking visual data post-operatively or perioperatively from patients and guiding them through physical therapy or physiotherapy exercises to get them better. So this stuff is out there now and people are using it. And you will see this creeping slowly and slowly into your practice at some point, because it's much more cost-effective and better for patients to have this running in the background at home with them rather than you having to be physically there to take them through this every single time. So that's predictive AI. Where we've got to in the last, since November 2022, is generative AI. November 2022 was when OpenAI released ChatGPT, and that sort of burst onto the scene. So this is generative AI, which is using big data models and not just predicting outcomes, it's creating new content, creating new ways of thinking. So it's really a subset of deep learning. And you can take visual data, text data, video data with prompts, so you tell it what to do, and it creates something new. How many of you use ChatGPT? A few, okay. I'll tell you, if I ask this, so a year ago, no one used it, really. Now we're getting to about 5%. Year on year, it will just get more and more. So there are many, many models available. The most commonly known is ChatGPT from OpenAI. OpenAI's office is around the corner from our offices in San Francisco for Viz. So GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformers. So generative means it's predicting. And really, all it is, it's really good at predicting the next thing when you tell it one thing. That's really what it does. And I'll explain that a bit better. It's pre-trained, so it's been taught on the internet, the entire internet. You train it, you give it everything, all the data, and then you stop the training, and then you release it. So if you're dealing with ChatGPT now, it was probably released 6 months ago. So it's not up to date as yet, the one you use, that's free. But it knows everything that ever existed on the internet till about 6 months ago. If you use the latest version of ChatGPT, which is for pro users, you have to pay $20 a month, it's 4.5. It can search the web and look for current data. So it's one level up. Transformer is another neural network architecture Google came out with in 2017. So it's very recent, this very high performance neural network that really digests data. So we talk about neural networks, we talk about deep learning, which is literally you show the picture, say there's a cat, it goes cat, 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 dog, 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 dog. Okay, it's 0.96 chance that that's a cat and not a dog or a bird. Fine, that's how neural networks or deep learning works. With generative AI, we use large language models in a huge neural network where it starts to predict. So if I said the cat likes to sleep in you're not going to say zebra. You're not going to say the Philippines, right? The chances are you're going to say either the box or the tree or something. There are billions of words you can use, and it's learned to predict what the next word is. And at such a fast speed that it's just running away with words and just creating. That's basically what it does. And it's the same with imaging. You showed a lot of images, and we'll create new images based on the images it's already seen by putting lots of bits of images together, because it's just predicting the next thing. How does it work in healthcare? Well, you can put anything in. You can put text, video, images, and it can put it all together and come up with something new. And it starts to feel a little bit more human, that it's almost talking to you. It's really strange. And I don't know how many of you guys play with it. It's getting better and better. And people talk about AGI, or artificial general intelligence, where you pass a Turing test. The Turing test is when you can test a computer program to see whether it's a human or not. It's almost starting to sound human. It's not, but it's sounding like a human being. There are multiple companies working in this space, in generative AI, both for front office tasks, like patient engagement, chatbots to talk to patients, decision-making, but also back-end administrative tasks. There's many, many companies with billions of dollars being thrown at this. So this is happening right now. As an example, Heidi, If any of you have used Heidi, you basically have it running in the background. You chat to your patient. It's recording a transcript of everything you're saying, and it's summarizing it, putting it into a note, and then coming up with next steps. The next steps are see the patient again in 6 weeks, order a CT scan, make sure they fill in the patient-reported outcome score, right? It's just doing it in the background. So by the time the patient leaves, you've got a full note, and you've got next steps already set up for you. It came out from Australia, but it's now everywhere. People are using it here in the UK. There are chatbots being built. Patient Now is a venture where the first port of call when a patient rings the hospital is not your secretary who doesn't want to answer the phone. It's not you. It's an agent that's asking the patient questions and sort of directing you, like you do with telephone banking, etc. It's getting you to the right person and making sure you're not, wasting time trying to get through to the right person. There's people working on finding the best evidence on the net, on PubMed, etc., and giving you the answers immediately. There's people working on coding everything automatically. As you do your operation, the coding just happens in the background. You don't need to pay the coders to do this. This is pretty cool. Hippocratic AI have just raised $150 million. It's a huge company in the US. It's going to come here. These are agents that talk patients through, say, a perioperative pathway. So say you're having a spinal fusion, it will chat to you as a patient, tell you what exercise you should be doing, how you should be getting ready, and it will talk to you afterwards. And you can talk to it. You can go to Hippocratic AI today and choose one of their modules, and there's modules for everything. There's lots of spine modules, and just start talking to it. And it's like talking to a virtual nurse practitioner or physiotherapy practitioner or a junior doctor, or even a senior doctor. Actually, it's as a senior surgeon, it's getting better and better. The problems with this kind of data is that a lot of it is just a huge amount of data dumped into this neural network, and it comes up with new things. Sometimes it hallucinates, it says the wrong thing, so you have to check everything it does. Getting it into our practice is going to be difficult because we're very resistant to change. When we started Viz, no one wanted to use our app because they just felt we were replacing radiologists. But in fact, now a lot of people use it because we're not replacing radiologists. You're triaging the right thing you need to know up to the front of the queue. Privacy and security everyone worries about, GDPR, patient data being held by these large language models. Energy, they use a lot of energy to run the GPUs, the computer units that you need to run it. So that's an issue. And bias is a problem. As an example, Stable Diffusion is one of the best image generators on the net. You can use ChatGPT. I'll show you an example. So if I put in here that I was going to a meeting here, BritSpine, and it's a meeting of experienced spine practitioners. That's the prompt that I put in. Make me an image of what a group of experienced spine practitioners looks like. This is what it comes up with. Now, I don't know about you, but this doesn't really represent what this crowd looks like. I think they managed to get 1 or 2 women in there. That's probably good. This is where we're at. So you can see what it's been trained on. It's been trained to see a particular type of image, so it will generate what it knows. It can't create brand new things. It's not going to create an alien. It just looks, these are the human data I have. I'll make humans that are experienced spine practitioners. You put it into ChatGPT, this is what this does, right? It's interesting, but you have to be aware. And it says right at the bottom, ChatGPT can make mistakes. Check important information. It makes mistakes. So you still need that human oversight. But just be aware. It's an incredible tool, but there are biases, and you need to be aware of that, particularly if you're using it for your patients. So where are we now? Generative AI is here. It's coming. It will be part of your practice. Microsoft are working on it. OpenAI. If you look at the Mayo, Advent, if you look at the big healthcare systems in the US, they are building these models that sit in your electronic health record system, whether it's Epic, Cerner, Allscripts, any of them. This will be sitting, when you start doing your next dictation clinic or writing your next letter, you'll suddenly find that module is sitting next to you that you can click and create letters automatically. So it's coming. Epic are already going to release a version soon. Cerner are going to release a version soon as well. So this is not something that's not going to be part of our practice. It's already here. It's a question of whether we can afford to pay for it in the NHS. The next level is agentic AI, and this is where we are as of the last couple of months. How many of you here have heard of agentic AI? Everyone. I was talking to you about it yesterday. So agentic AI is, so everything so far is creating new content, coming up. So if you want to take a family holiday for 2 in Italy, family holiday for 5 in Italy for 2 weeks, you can ask ChatGPT to make an entire itinerary for you. It makes a beautiful itinerary, makes a timetable, tells you which restaurants to go to, and it'll print it out for you in Excel file as a table so you can take it with you on holiday. And I've done it. It's beautiful. What it can't do at the moment is book the restaurants for you and book all the trips you're going on. But that's what agentic AI does. It does the next level, which is execution. And there are multiple companies and billions of dollars again spent on agents being built and all kinds of things. Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk believe that in the next 5 years, we'll have many more agents working for us than there are human beings, which are about 8 billion people on the planet. Many more agents doing specific things for us every single day. And what sort of thing? I'll give you an example. So this was released 2 days ago. It's a Chinese company called Manus, M-A-N-U-S, which means hand. It's your right-hand person. And imagine you wanted to interview for a new spine practitioner in your practice, say a nurse practitioner or a junior doctor, and you've been sent hundreds of CVs. Think about the process now. How many people have to read through all the CVs, the resumes, and work out who you're going to hire? I'm going to show you this. It's just a demonstration, just to show you what.
Hi, I'm Pete from Manus AI. For the past year, we've been quietly building what we believe is the next evolution in AI. And today, we're launching an early preview of Manus, the first general AI agent. This isn't just another chatbot or workflow. It's a truly autonomous agent that bridges the gap between conception and execution. While other AI stops at generating ideas, Manus delivers results. We see it as the next paradigm of human-machine collaboration, and potentially a glimpse into AGI. Now let me show you Manus in action across 3 completely different tasks. Let's start with an easy one. In this example, we'll ask Manus to help screen resumes. I've just sent Manus a zip file containing 10 resume documents. Since each Manus session has its own computer, it can work like a human. First unzipping the file, then browsing through each resume page by page, and recording important information to documents. Manus works asynchronously in the cloud, which means you can close your laptop anytime, and Manus will notify you when everything is complete. Of course, you can also give Manus new instructions at any time. Here I've sent Manus 5 more resumes. After carefully reading all 15 resumes, Manus provides its ranking suggestions, along with candidate profiles and evaluation criteria as supporting materials. This is pretty good, but I prefer a spreadsheet. Let's have Manus create one.
So it's just generating all by itself. You're doing nothing, and it's a few minutes.
Manus has its own knowledge and memory.
It's already decided which candidates you should shortlist, which are the most likely candidates to get the job, and also come up with questions you should be asking them when you do an interview with them. And it will take that information when you do interview them and tell you which the best candidate is to hire. And this is like literally 2 minutes. You know, can you imagine going through 20 resumes and trying to work CVs and trying to work out who you're going to hire? So this is another example where he's asked the agent, the estate agent, the real estate agent, to find him a property in a safe neighborhood in New York at the price point that he wants for his family. And it's doing it. I've seen versions where you say, I want to book a restaurant for my wife and I next week. And it goes off, it's got your credit card details, it rings the restaurant, talks to them and says, I'm an agent, I'm representing Manager Ramachandran, I want to book a table for 2, do you have availability at 7:30? And then the person at the end of the phone says, no, but we've got 8 o'clock, okay, 8 o'clock is great, can I book the table for 2? And then sends you an email saying I've booked it. It's happening now, it's already here, I've seen it, it's pretty crazy, right? So I'll move on because we'll finish off here. I just want to say that things are changing very, very fast. AI is accelerating at a pace which is incredible. And you want to be in that 1%, the people who know that this stuff is happening and you start playing with it. Make your mistakes now, stay ahead of the curve. Don't wait for it to come to you, you should go to it. Honestly, just spend a percentage of your time every week just thinking about what's out there and what it can do. I love this graph. These are laundresses employed in the US by private US households in 1850 up to 1910. The year 1910, the electric washing machine was invented. We don't see laundresses anywhere anymore. And we've seen this with bookshops, we've seen it with many things, and we keep putting our head in the sand and hoping that it won't affect us. Yes, we sit at a very high cognitive, emotional, and manual dexterity level. If you're a surgeon, if you're working with human beings, you're providing much more than just an administrative task. But there are many of these things that are slowly not being replaced, but changed. And you just have to be aware how it's changing. So I say first we electrified, then we digitized, and now we cognify. And you need to be ready for this. So just have a think of what's coming, what's already here, and how you're going to be part of this wave that's already hit us, to be honest. I'm going to stop there and take any questions. Thank you very much. Sorry, that's a lot of information that I threw at you.
Manoj, what a lovely exciting and stimulating presentation.
Thank you.
We'll have time for a few questions, but if I can ask, if, as a patient, say I have a kid who needs a hip surgery, today, I want to find the best surgeon where I can get to get the best result. Can the AI help at this moment?
So what do we mean by best surgeon and best result?
Well, I just want the best outcome, so how will I know using AI?
So this is the problem. So how do we define best outcomes? You know, we have national initiatives like GIRFT, but how do we define what a best outcome is? And that's difficult. It's like saying, what's the best restaurant? Right? I know it's a slightly different area, but how do you define what great food is? And this is the issue, is ultimately, it can only give you a result based on what it sees. And it's very easy to game the system. So if you wanted to be the person that's always chosen for spine surgery, you would flood the internet in all kinds of ways with how great your patients are doing and how happy they are with their outcomes. So that when the training data goes into the large language model, it sees you as the person to be sent to, right? Now, there is ranking, and there's sort of weights given to veracity and the ground truth of the data that goes into it. So, for example, if you've got information that comes from the Mayo Clinic or any of the large healthcare systems, Stanford, that gets a bit more weighting in these models. So it trusts that more. So you're far better off being at a big institution with great results than you're being a loner in a single group in private practice. So that's what will change over time. But ultimately, you can game the system. So you've got to be very careful what the result shows. As a patient, it's tough. It's the same as searching Google at the moment.
Thank you.
Stephen Vogel, Health Sciences University.
Hi.
I'm interested in your reflections on the implications for healthcare education and the curriculum and kind of core skills and changing skills in this light. And I wonder if you've got a view about healthcare regulation, you know, GMC or HPCV, all those who I know are struggling to keep up, don't know quite what to say, except for whatever you do as a practitioner, you have to own it anyway. But they've also got to make some decisions about how it's used in practice.
So it's really, really hard, and it's a really good question, because I'll take two of them separately. Education is a big problem. I don't, if you have, those of you who have kids here, my kids, I've got an 8-year-old, a 15, and a 17-year-old. Starting with my 8-year-old, they will use ChatGPT. They play with it, right? And if you look at schools right up to medical school to trainees, people are using it to generate results and then modify it slightly and present it as your work. That's happening already. You can't stop it. For me, it reminds me of 15 years ago when people said you can't use Google in the classroom. But now you wouldn't say that. So it's a question of how we work alongside it. And it has major implications, not just for education, but research. We know that most publishing houses, Elsevier, et cetera, are struggling with how much generative AI-related publications are being sent into them. And you can run it through AI detectors, but there are programs to un-AI. It's easy. You can generate it and then put it through an un-AI program, and it will look like it was human-made. So there's always workarounds. So the question is, how do we embrace it rather than deny it? And we'll struggle as an education system and as regulatory bodies, professional bodies like GMC and GNC, we will struggle. And we struggle because our curricula are very, very old-fashioned. They're not, you know, if you're going to teach someone medical school now, what I would do is set up a personalized chatbot that talks to each individual resident or medical student and teaches them what they need to know based on their capabilities and their background knowledge, not just the same educational information to everyone. So I think we're at this inflection point where anything can happen now. And the wave is here. We're already using it. No one knows what to do. But at the moment, the only thing you can say is you take personal responsibility, whether you're the school child, medical student, whether you're a professional working doctor, physio, nurse, whatever you decide. You can use ChatGPT, you can use Google, you can use anything, but you make that final decision and say, I will do this to my patient. You take the responsibility for that. That's all we can do at the moment. The EU are much more strict about how they regulate AI. The US and other areas haven't really thought about it that much, or they want it to be innovative and just explode. The EU are being much more restrictive, but we worry that the EU and UK are going to fall behind everywhere else because we're not letting it into our practice as quickly as possible. So Mayo is a classic example. The Mayo have teamed up with Google and they're digitizing their entire paper records, all of it. So that Google will have a program sitting on Epic, which is their healthcare record system, that just helps you and acts as your co-pilot. And they're already talking about, can you imagine if you're seeing a patient, and I said this to someone yesterday, that you haven't seen for a year, you're trying to read through their notes and then work out where they are a year later as they walk into the room. But you'll have a co-pilot that sits on your desktop or in your ear that says, that's Mrs. Jones, you know, you saw her a year ago, ask her how her holiday went in Tenerife, because she was going to go in May. And then she's been checking in her home and saying her symptoms have been up and down, just to see how she's doing, and you quickly examine her, and that's done. And that's actually, it's a much more personal experience, because you're talking to someone knowing a lot more about them. And so this is what, you know, we're going to be co-piloting, that's where it's heading. But how we regulate that is a very difficult area. Sorry, that was a long answer again.
Thank you. Michelle.
Hiya, thanks for the talk, it's great, and loads of great changes coming. I'm interested in the patient-facing stuff. Certainly within Greater Manchester we've got a 15-year difference in life expectancy depending on where you live because of the health inequalities. In Blackpool, a third of people couldn't afford to heat their home this winter. How do we prevent inadvertently making those health inequalities worse by enforcing digital technologies on them?
I totally agree with you. And this is the same for anything. If you knew when you make banking digital, when you make shopping online, you immediately exclude an underserved population. And this has been, and people are worried about age being a barrier, but it's been shown over and again, you can't put these biases in and say that someone in their 70s, 80s, 90s can't use a phone and can't use digital technology. So it's a very real problem, but we have gone from analog to digital already, and we can't do anything about it. You know, we're the human face of healthcare, but most of the back-end tasks and everything that we store information on patients is digital. So we just have to be completely aware of access and who we're reaching out to. And so, I mean, Viz was a classic example where we were building a technology that works on an iPhone, works on an Android phone, and moves scans around for stroke. But actually, the biggest incidence of stroke in the US is in the southern belt, so all the states in the south, like Tennessee, Georgia. So we made sure we started our first trials with real patients in the poorest, most underserved hospitals, because that's where it has the most impact. So there has to be something from the companies bringing this in and thinking where they're deploying the technology, not just the worried well in rich areas, you know, with access to every digital technology, but it also has to come from the overseeing bodies. So whether that's the NHS, whatever that body is. So it has to be everyone, not just you at a personal level. But yeah, it's a real problem. But it's in every sector, it's not just healthcare.
Thank you. Manoj, once again, thanks a lot for such a stimulating start of the meeting. And as a gesture, we would like to...
That's very kind. Thank you very much. Thank you. And I'm around for the rest of the day, so I'm happy to talk to anyone about any of this. Or if you've got something interesting, let's talk. If you want to build something. Thank you.
So now we have best of the best papers. Next session. Thank you.
So we'll start with the best of the best papers. Can we invite the first speaker on the podium, please?
Morning. Manoj Berum. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Manash. I'm a junior doctor in Cambridge, Addenbrooke's. I work as a junior clinical fellow there. I'm going to present our study, which is looking at developing a core information set for patients with dementia cycle myelopathy, and also how we evaluated that in our centre. These are some of my acknowledgements. So members of the Department of Neurosurgery, as well as the Department of Physiotherapy. I've got no disclosures. So DCM is poorly understood outside specialist settings, and this creates issues, particularly when patients present And we're trying to make shared decision-making decisions about when to operate, type of operation. It might not be that the operation is offered in the initial setting. It might be a little bit later on follow-up consultations. So we wanted to look at how a core information set could help us to streamline consultations, to help personalize education, as well as to prevent information overload, so that we could help patients make that, or help along that process where they're making that decision. It's also, we try to give patients leaflets and information cards, but we felt that they weren't really taking on board the information in the best form possible. So we asked the question, could we use a core information set to address patient education needs? So we used quite a few methods. It was a mixed method approach. So we had a scope and review initially, and then we had patient interviews as well as professional interviews, which some of you may have already been involved in. And there was also a Delphi study, which was done over 2 rounds. And then we had a consensus meeting, which then developed the core information set, which we then evaluated in our tertiary centre. So there was the results of the Delphi, 2 rounds. The first round had 100% response rate with 57 participants, of which were professionals as well as patients involved in that. And then we had the second round with a nutrition rate of 19%, again 100% response rate, and we had 32 descriptors, which were then discussed in a consensus meeting of 16 participants. And then a final core information set was decided, which is this. So there's 7 things mainly that are on there. So what's DCM? How's it diagnosed? What does the MRI show? How can we treat it? And what's the role of severity? What's the long-term outlook? And how can patients navigate these changes? And particularly the second one, how is it diagnosed? A lot of patients go through a long process. Before it's diagnosed, you might see a lot of practitioners, a lot of general practitioners, a lot of physios, and I think the data shows that patients can go on to see 5 different clinic consultations before they get a diagnosis. So that was something which was really important to include in that, as well as what is the role of the MRI and how that can help patients picture their condition. So this core information set was given to clinicians to act as an agenda, so not to take the main role of the consultation, but just an agenda of points to consider. We then did a single centre evaluation where we surveyed patients before and then afterwards, after we implemented it. And essentially there was no difference that we found, which perhaps could be quite a few reasons. It's quite difficult to measure this, so we used surveys, but perhaps there are better ways to do that. But the feedback was generally quite encouraging. Patients were happy with the consultations that they received, and the clinicians felt that this was something which was potentially implementable, it was appropriate, and also feasible. So in conclusion, we've developed a core information set to help with the shared decision-making in DCM care. It's shown provisional validity in a single centre, but external validation would be required to, and we welcome your thoughts. If you're interested, contact info@myloppy.org. Thanks.
Any questions? If I may ask, so thank you for the presentation. So we already have provisions in place in terms of the 3-legged consenting process for most conditions, which follow when the consenting process actually starts off when you're actually seeing the patient and giving them options with all the information you provide. And obviously they get time to reflect on the conversation you had and get back to you. So that process is in place. And how does this sort of differ or add into, because you then have a system where to some of our patients, there might be too much information from different sources. So how do you sort of standardize that in?
Yeah, so I think, so I had a discussion with some of the other members of the team, and one of the anecdotes which they said was that when you first diagnose a patient with DCM, it can really be kind of a consultation challenge, because there's so many things that they've gone through previously, and now they've got a diagnosis that they can pin things on. It can be very difficult to channel that conversation, and I guess what this is more so an agenda for that initial diagnosis of this is what you've got, and these are the things that we'll just talk through to consider. But of course, the consenting part would come a bit later on when you've decided to have an operation.
Sure. Thank you. Any other questions?
I have one question. You mentioned that on average there were 5 consultations. Now, is that for diagnosis or to treatment?
So, in general, within neurological conditions, it can be more. The data shows that there's at least more consultations with generalist practitioners before you get a diagnosis. But particularly for myelopathy, it was seen that before diagnosis, it was on average about 5 consultations before you're diagnosed. So they've seen 5 previous people before.
So with non-spine services or with spine services?
Non-spine services.
Okay. So you think that this would help improve the understanding before these patients get to us, so that the diagnosis could be hastened up a bit? Is that what the...
No, not in that sense. So more so that understanding that the patients have gone through a long journey beforehand, and when they get to you, to sort of have an agenda to that conversation of, okay, this is how we've got to this journey, and these are the things that we've used to, diagnose you with this condition.
Okay. Any other questions, please? You'll have to come to the mic, John, sorry. Can you... I won't be able to hear you otherwise properly.
Hi, John Leach from Manchester. Great talk, thank you. This links in with sort of patient information, ways patients can access information we heard about earlier. I'm aware of the great work of myelopathy.org. I did start signposting patients to the website, and I got some feedback that terrified them, because there were sometimes patients at risk of myelopathy that didn't have it, or with mild myelopathy. So just a comment really, how do we filter information appropriately for patients? Information is great. We want our patients to be informed, but sometimes they do find it quite scary.
Yeah, so I guess there's a wealth of stuff on the website, and I guess in that, with respect to this core information set, I guess it's more so to, instead of giving patients a leaflet which they can then use to find more information, it's more so to guide what information you're giving them using this agenda, which gives them the pertinent information for them that's relevant to what you're diagnosing with. That's more so what this is sort of angled for.
Okay. I think the comment about scaring patients is quite relevant. No, thank you very much. Well done. Thank you.
Thanks.
Can I invite Christopher Dare, please? Thank you.
Morning, I'm Chris Dare. I'm a consultant spinal surgeon. I work in independent practice, and thank you for the organising committee to inviting me to talk to you about motion preservation, an alternative to fusion, talking about lumbar facet arthroplasty. These are my disclosures. So to fuse or not to fuse is the question we need to ask ourselves in the management of lumbar canal stenosis. There are a number of studies already in existence, particularly the Swedish study and the Norwegian study, as well as the SLIP study, with the Swedish study favouring decompression alone over fusion. The Norwegian study is equal outcomes over fusion or decompression, and the SLIP study, where there's instability, favours fusion over decompression alone. But is there a third option? And this is where the top study shows possibly benefit of dynamic stabilisation over fusion. We know that decompressive surgeries gives good clinical outcomes for all patients having lumbar canal stenosis surgery. But are our two options the best option, or is there an alternative? Facet arthroplasty is not new. It's been around for quite a long time. It's probably been around 20 years. And the implant I'm talking about first came into iteration 20 years ago, was then taken over by the current company in 2011 and re-engineered, made smaller and more user-friendly. It was CE marked in 2012, and then an IDE randomized controlled trial was set up in 2017. The indications for this implant are low back pain and leg pain with or without claudication caused by at least caused by at least moderate canal stenosis at a single level between L3 and L5. Degenerative spondylolisthesis up to grade 1 with or without facet arthrosis in age 40 to 75. The surgical technique is a midline incision. It's a pedicle screw-based system with complete laminectomy and bilateral facetectomy, with then implant sizing and then implantation. The FDA study design was a prospective multi-center randomized study of TOPS over fusion. It was powered for superiority, and the plan was to recruit 500 patients. The inclusion criteria was single-level pathology between L2 and L5, degenerative spondylolisthesis, grade 1, moderate to severe spinal stenosis, at least a baseline ODI of 40, 35 to 80 years old, and predominant leg symptoms rather than back pain. Exclusion criteria were obese patients, more than one level affected, a very narrow degenerate disc, and a greater than grade 1 spondylolisthesis or a lytic spondylolisthesis, and previous surgery at any level. They were randomized 2 to 1, 2 into the TOPS group, 1 into the fusion group, and they were assessed at 6 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, a year, and then annually for 5 years. The primary endpoints were ODI and composite clinical success, ODI reduction of 15 points or more, no further surgery or injections, and no new or worse neurological deficits. These are the baseline demographics for both groups, which are fairly even, and the operative characteristics were fairly similar in length of time for surgery, length of stay, and estimated blood loss. The primary endpoints were the patients to be considered successful had to have no reoperations or no lumbar injections in the post-operative period, an ODI reduction of greater than 15 points, no new or worsening neurological deficit, and no major device adverse events. And the composite clinical success between the TOPS and the fusion group favoured TOPS with an 80% success rate compared to 55% in the fusion group. These are the outcome measures for each primary endpoint, which led to the composite clinical outcome. The primary endpoints for the Oswestry Disability Index favoured TOPS over the 2-year period, with sustained benefit over that 2-year period, with a gradual trending or tailing off in the fusion group. Secondary endpoints, VAS for leg pain was fairly similar for both groups, as one would expect for a decompressive operation for stenosis. but there seemed to be a favouring of TOPS over fusion when it came to back pain. Safety for all operations, so the subsequent surgical interventions were higher in the fusion group than they were in the TOPS group. So in summary, preliminary RCT results demonstrate good clinical outcomes at the immediate post-op time and continue to improve over the 2-year period. TOPS demonstrates significant and sustained improvement in ODI VAS back and VAS leg with equal to or significantly better outcomes than TLIF at every time point over the 2-year period. Reoperation rates were below those for fusion. So I'd like to conclude by TOPS facet arthroplasty may offer a motion-preserving surgical alternative for stenosis or stenosis with spondylolisthesis. Thank you.
Any questions?
Just a
Can you
quick question.
introduce yourself as well, please?
So obviously the mobile part is softer. So just what's the lifespan of that intervention compared to just screw it up with last for?
So what's the lifespan of the implant?
Yeah.
In its entirety? Well, we don't know that yet. It's not been around long enough to say it's going to last a lifetime.
And this, but you're putting that on patients. So any approximation?
No.
Okay.
Hi. I'm sure you're aware that...
Excuse me, can you introduce yourself as well,
of course.
please?
So I'm Sleiman Haddad, I'm from Barcelona.
Thank you.
So I wanted to ask you, so as you know, in the Nordic studies, TLF is having hard time competing with non-instrumented decompression. And I'm not sure that TLF is the proper group, control group for this intervention. And maybe a better group would be non-instrumented decompression, just to compare and see if it is really worth the effort of adding this extra cost.
Yeah, so I mean, they could have had a third arm. They could have had non-instrumented decompression, fusion, and TOPS. But they're comparing the decompression results to the previous studies. So the data is there about what the outcomes from decompression alone are already. They're already existent. So I think no point in reinventing the wheel.
Hi, I'm Paul Davis from Newhall Hospital.
I know you.
Hi, Chris. You call it a facet joint arthroplasty system.
Yeah.
Isn't it just another dynamic stabilization system because you're just using a pedicle screws and
Yeah,
just a soft stabilization between?
It replaces the function of the facet joints, yeah. So it's not as though it's a resurfacing or you know, you're engineering a new facet joint. It's replacing the posterior stabilizing effects that facet joints have. But it's a dynamic stabilization system.
Yeah. And in Europe, these systems are being used by many spine surgeons. Why do you think in the UK people are very reticent about taking that?
That's a really good question. I wish I had a straight answer for it. I think partly it's because there is a great reticence to motion preservation in general. And whether it's... I don't think I'm ever going to convince those who believe that decompression alone for lumbar canal stenosis, I'm never going to convert them to doing some sort of instrumentation. This is probably aimed at people who will fuse or think fusion is the right option for particularly a degenerative spondylolisthesis with instability. But I think part of the reason it's not widely known about, and that's part of the reason for presenting it here today.
Great, thank you. Thanks. Can I invite Ahmed Hassan, please? Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Ahmed Hassan. I'm a spinal surgery fellow at Nottingham University Hospitals. I'm also an associate member of the AO Spine Knowledge Forum Trauma and Infection. And today I'm presenting our most recent study. It's a cost utility analysis study comparing surgical versus non-surgical management of thoracolumbar burst fracture in neurologically intact patients. This is my conflict of interest disclosure. So as an introduction, the most common injury patterns that can be seen in the thoracolumbar junction is complete and incomplete burst fractures. Around 45% of the fractures happening in this part are burst fractures. Both treatment modalities, surgery and conservative treatment, are valid treatment options in this region, and there is no concrete evidence supporting the use of one over the other. So we conducted a health economic analysis study trying to shed more light in this area. So we conducted the thoracolumbar A3, A4 study. It started in 2016 in 14 sites across 10 countries. It was an observational prospective study. We included patients with A3 and A4 fractures at the thoracolumbar region, only neurologically intact patients, and we excluded pathological fractures, polytraumatized patients, and patients with previous spine surgery. So we did a cost-utility analysis where we calculated the quality-adjusted life years based on the patient's ODI, based on the EQ5D3L scores that the patient filled in their daily diary, and we calculated both the direct and indirect costs of the intervention, either surgical or non-surgical, in order to finally reach the cost-utility analysis. So the direct costs were calculated from the direct costs of the procedure itself, either surgical or non-surgical, and the indirect costs were concluded from the indirect cost questionnaire filled by the patient. For the results regarding the improvement in the ODI for both surgical and non-surgical patients, there's no significant difference in ODI improvements, either surgically or non-surgically. However, patients who were treated surgically reached a more significant improvement in the ODI 26 days faster than patients who were treated conservatively. For resource utilization over 1 year, non-surgically treated patients consumed all other resources much higher than the surgically treated patients, included physiotherapy visits, braces, and opioid use, for example. All of this was reflected in higher health costs. So, however, the only cost that was inflicted over the surgically treated patients at 1 year was the cost of the surgery itself, leading to a health utility analysis favoring non-surgical treatment in the first year, because surgery costs more. However, when we redo the cost utility analysis at 2 years, we found that there is an incremental increase in all the costs that, apart from the surgery, over the second year, including physiotherapy sessions, opioid use, and, for example, days absent from work, leading to more or less equalization of the total costs, both the indirect and the direct cost for the surgically and non-surgically treated patients. Consequently, we find that the cost utility analysis at 2 years finally favors surgical treatment, because it saves more money at 2 years, and if it's calculated all over the patient's whole working lifespan. So in conclusion, surgical and non-surgical treatments for thoracolumbar burst fracture carry the same patient-reported outcome. If getting better faster is an important factor to consider, we should consider surgical treatment. Regarding the cost utility analysis, greater productivity loss and caregiver costs in the non-surgical group of patients at 2 years and all over the patient projected working lifetime leads to the deduction that surgery can offer a better option for those patients. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Before Vinay comes to the podium, can I quickly ask a question? Two things. So your post-operative patients did not need a brace at all. You didn't use a brace for any of the post-op patients.
No, it depends. So it was a standard of care study. So the use of a post-operative brace was not standardized in all.
But was that included in your health economics then?
Yes.
Okay. The second thing was, I didn't see any SAEs, any serious adverse events or any adverse events being costed. There were no adverse events at all. Only the direct surgical cost was what you put forth.
No, and we also calculated the presence of any adverse events.
Okay.
So Vinay Jazani from Stoke-on-Trent. Thanks, great presentation. It kind of follows on from Sachin's question. So your standard of care, so these were all non-UK centres, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so your standard of care is a defined inpatient spell, always have a brace for non-surgical, always have a brace, always has physiotherapy? Because in the UK, most people are sent home, A3s don't have a brace.
So the use of brace differs from one center to the other. So we didn't force a specific post-operative protocol in each center. However, we calculated all the direct and indirect costs in each center separately.
Okay, but I guess what I'm trying to say is over the centres, were most of them treated as inpatients and almost all the non-surgical had braces, or?
Yes.
Okay, because I think for us in the UK, we're kind of a little bit braver in our conservative management.
Yes.
Probably the cost effectiveness and non-surgical would be better,
Maybe.
Probably. But
Maybe.
Yeah, thanks.
Nobody else? I've got one more question. You showed a difference of nearly £9,000, 121 versus 112.
Sorry?
No, in your 2-year analysis, you showed 121 versus 112. So you think that £9,000 between operative and non-operative equates to a good quality difference, is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Can I invite the next speaker, please? It's Mohammed Wael Mohammed. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mohammed, one of the new surgery registrars at Leeds General Infirmary. Excuse the voice, I'm just recovering from some cold. So I'm going to present, do patients with cervical myelopathy receive timely surgery in our department? So we'll start with a quick, easy case. 77-year-old gentleman who was seen in clinic, found to be myelopathic with progressive features, booked into surgery as P2 patient. You can see P2 here, should have an operation within a month. This was the MRI scan, which shows cord compression. The patient unfortunately ended up waiting for over a year and deteriorated significantly preoperatively. So cervical myelopathy, as we all know, is a progressive condition which can lead to irreversible neurologic deficit, great impacts into the socioeconomic status of the patient and also in the quality of life. Conservative measures here rarely do anything, especially for moderate to severe cases, and it's a time-dependent pathology. Due to many factors, including limitation to resources, patients wait for long times. We aim to assess these patients who are booked as P2 patients, so should have an operation within a month, and also they are very progressively myelopathic, and evaluate also whether delays in surgery contributed to preoperative worsening. So it was a retrospective analysis done over a year of 2023, over a 12-month period. We got these patients. We included only patients who had complete data, basically, in the documentation notes of their clinical assessment in clinic and clinical assessment pre-surgery. Results, so a total of 338 C-spine surgeries that were done in 2023. We wind up with a number of 136 patients who were included after all the exclusions were done. Majority were male with a median age of 63 years old. We can see here, unfortunately, only 14% actually were operated within the P2 period, which is the 28 days. The majority of the patients who were operated beyond the 1-month period actually remained the same clinically, but you can argue also that they did not improve some of them because they waited for too long. And 6.8% were significantly worse and deteriorated in the symptoms. We identified 65 days as a cutoff point where patients who waited for 65 days were high. They had a high chance of deteriorating, and this chance actually increased as time passes, as you can see on the table there. And this is consistent with what's available on the literature, which is patients who wait for a long time and also who have severe myelopathy end up having worse outcomes. Loads of recommendations out there. You have the WFNO Spine Committee recommend using the MJOA scale to assess what severity from the get-go, offer surgery as required, among other very helpful recommendations. Unfortunately, there is no nationally agreed myelopathy pathway. So you can see there is the nice nationally agreed Kodak-Weiner pathway. We have a radiculopathy pathway, but nothing nationally for the myelopathy. In Leeds, we started this pathway, and it's in the early stages at the moment. So we use the MJOA scale to see the patients in clinic, classify them in mild, moderate, and severe, and also we use that as a cutoff point. So if the patient is having delayed surgery beyond the P2 period, which is 4 weeks, then we should do that MJOA scale repeated at 6 weeks, and also we do it in follow-up. And for people who don't know this MJOA scale, it's a very simplified version of the pathway. So patients who have acute deterioration should just go to A&E straight away. However, patients who are diagnosed with myelopathy with no acute deterioration should be tried within 48 hours. And then if they have a severe myelopathy according to the MJOA scale, then basically they are seen in expedited clinic within a week, offered P2 surgery, which is within 1 month. And this only exists for now for the severe ones. For mild and moderate, we wound up using the same existing pathways as we're just starting. Main obstacles we identified: not all of these patients are seen in clinic on time, and also the lack of dedicated theater lists, which I'm sure is a problem among many trusts. We should continue to monitor our pathway to make sure we're meeting our targets, collect patient feedback, healthcare professional feedback, and also, importantly, our outcomes to be audited regularly. And in conclusion, these patients, if they end up having prolonged, symptoms, they can deteriorate with irreversible deficit. So we prioritize this patient by creating this pathway, and hopefully this leads to improvements in the pathway and also introduction of similar pathways in different trusts as well, including nationally. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions, sir? So while you're coming up, I've got a question for you. So in terms of, I see the challenges of creating pathways and creating more sort of potential barriers, how I look at it in terms of, but I think it's also important to understand the natural history, and I think it's important to differentiate. So we all appreciate it's a time-dependent surgical condition, but then I think that'll be quite different. If someone comes to a clinic with a 2-year history of a slow progression, you might not necessarily put them as a P2 compared to someone who's saying, I'm getting progressively worse in the last 6 weeks. So I think by creating pathways to then say everyone goes on a cervical myelopathy pathway might be quite challenging, because the presentation of cervical myelopathy, every individual might be different. How are you going to address that?
I agree, but that's not the pathway, basically. So as I said, there were 300 and something patients in 2023. Some of them were P3, P4, P5. We only included the ones that were severe, rapidly progressing myelopathy, and clinically deemed so by the consultant or the registrar. So all the others are offered the same existing, and as I said in the pathway, the mild and moderate cases are treated as per normal, P2, P3, P3, P4. So this only applies to the severe, rapidly progressing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Kaushik Ghosh from Preston.
Hello.
Interesting. I mean, we all have very similar problem. And following on what Rohit was saying, it's the severe one, and it's still waited more than 6 months. My question is, did you look into how many of those patients actually presented to A&E while they were waiting? And number 2, whether or how many of them got expedite later from GP? Because these are all severe, and we all get continuous letters.
Do you mean patient who presented to A&E after they were on the waiting list?
After, while they're on the waiting list.
Excellent, yeah. So that was one of the problems actually that we're facing as well. So now we're considering giving basically a copy of the MJOA to the patient, okay? And we introduce also the bit that if they're not offered surgery within 4 weeks, we should call them, so spine and nerve specialists, to call them at 6 weeks and repeat the MJOA again. So that's how we're trying to catch up these patients. The second one, sorry, I forgot the...
Very similar, expedite letter from GP.
Expedited patients from GP, similar process. If the patient comes with a GP, we see them within 48 hours, and then we assess again, according to them. If they're really progressive myelopathy, deemed so by a healthcare professional or spinal nurse, according to the score objectively severe, then yes. Then they will crack on the pathway, basically. And that includes all these urgent patients who are referred by the GP if they fit the criteria of progressively deteriorating within a month or so.
And the other question was, how did you decide severity? Was it clinical or radiological or both?
Okay, so going through this quality improvement project, there was discrepancies in how people document severity, which is a problem. That's why we said objectively we need the MJOR scale. So it depends on all of them. The recommendations I put earlier, it tells nice recommendations about how to predict patients according to radiological compression if they don't have symptoms. However, we mainly depend on clinical picture. So if the patient has very severe compression of the MRI scan and they're asymptomatic, we would, according to the patient, we might offer surgery, but it's not, it's not going to be in the pathway that is patients who are actively deteriorating. But yeah, it's difficult to predict who will worsen, but it depends on just how is your clinical picture when we see you, I think, at this stage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Elena Jar from Queen's Medical Center, Nottingham.
Hello. Yeah.
What's your definition of rapidly deteriorating? What's the time frame? This is the first question. Second question is, we do a lot of myelopathy cases where they have COPD, heart disease. How can you use MJOA score on those patients? And those, they are a significant bulk of the myelopathy patients.
Yeah.
Right? And third thing is, the take-home message, is the problem in actually knowing if we need to put them P1, or is it actually just that we don't have capacity, even if we put all the patients in P1 and they deserve to be on P1? How are we going to change the main problem, which is actually capacity?
Yeah, so P1 is 72 hours, so that is emergency. So that is the other
P2,
arm.
P2, sorry.
Yeah, okay. So from the beginning, rapidly deteriorating, I don't have a cutoff time. If a patient comes to me in clinic and say, doctor, I was walking last month, but this month I am using crutches, that is deterioration.
So 1 month?
I would say how, depending on the patient, okay? If
So we don't know, we don't have it.
No, we don't have a cutoff point. Yeah, that's what I mean. It's all dependent on the clinical assessment. In patients who are having COPD or other comorbidities, yes, there's nothing we can do about that. So if the patient needs surgery urgently, however, unfortunately, they're not fit, then...
It's not about fit, it's about using MJOA score.
Yeah.
You cannot assess MJOA score on someone who cannot go the stairs because he has shortness of breath or he has, I don't know, lumbar.
Yeah, but if they cannot be assessed on the MJOA because they have that, they're not fit for surgery. Anesthetically, they cannot be. And then the third one, I forgot you said...
One last question. Aprija?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Aprija Gulati,
Hello.
Preston. Good attempt. My question is, when you get the triage, majority of us don't have the enough information to triage them as MJOA.
Correct.
How do you triage till you have seen in the clinic, just based on the referral?
Yeah, so the difficult part, it needs a team. So nurse specialists, the doctors, so there must be someone who is responsible for triaging these patients. So when, for example, we get a referral currently in our system, before this introduction of the system, we get a referral, we book them through the referral system itself to clinic, and that was one of the problems. It takes forever to see these patients. However, if we say, okay, instead of the email of the clinic coordinator, why not go to the spinal nurse, for example, who can do a list of these patients who were referred by us during the on-call, for example, in that week, and then we can triage them, even by telephone initially. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We invite the next speaker, please. Chuck Lamb. Thank you. mean, from the previous one, what you mentioned was quite relevant. You know, it's the clinical decision-making process. It's quite difficult. You know, you have got a patient who says they're progressively getting worse and they had a heart attack last week. You know, what do? You know, there's cause and then there's a judgment you have to use. So, very valid point.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chuck Lamb. I'm a medical student at the University of Birmingham. I also studied bioengineering at Imperial College London. In this study, I helped develop a machine learning analysis utilizing a cluster-based approach, and we were looking at the predictors and dynamics of self-image in an adult spinal deformity patient population. I have no disclosures related to this talk. So, a lot is known about the self-image in adolescent idiopathic scoliosis cohort. However, most of the research effort in an ASD population is focused on function or pain, and the interplay between self-image, functional limitations, and radiographical parameters in ASD has not been comprehensively studied. Furthermore, very few studies have examined what's known as the patient-accepted symptom state for self-image in this ASD population. So we hypothesized that self-image reflects psychosocial, functional, and external factors more so than radiographical parameters in ASD. We also posit that self-image shows different dynamics in different age groups and different severity of disease clusters. So we aim to assess SRS-22 self-image patterns and responses in ASD with an emphasis on different clusters of patients. We wanted to determine the general and cluster-specific predictors of baseline SRS self-image, as well as any improvements in self-image after surgery and follow-up. So we conducted a retrospective analysis of a prospective multi-center European ASD registry. We included any ASD patients who had more than 2 years of follow-up, and we excluded anyone who had missing SRS-22 self-image scores at baseline or at 2 years follow-up. And patients were selected and grouped into 3 clusters. I just want to make a point about how we determined what these clusters were. So this was from a study from our group in 2019, where we used an unsupervised machine learning algorithm to discover that there exist 3 distinct types of patients in this ASD patient population. And these types are as follows. So we have younger patients with a coronal deformity, we have adults with moderate deformity and moderate disability, and we have adults with severe deformities and severe disability. We then looked at what's known as the patient acceptable symptom state for self-image. This is also known as PASS, and this is essentially a threshold in which a patient feels satisfied or they feel, yeah, I accept my symptom state. So we define this as either being PASS positive or PASS negative. PASS positive essentially means that a patient is satisfied with their self-image, whereas PASS negative indicates that they are not. We then utilize machine learning models to predict baseline self-image and any improvements in self-image after surgery at 2 years. So in terms of the results, we came up with a sample size of 710 patients, and we then divided these patients into our aforementioned 3 clusters. And looking at the responses to surgery, at baseline, only 13% of patients were PASS positive, i.e. they were satisfied with their self-image status. And this improved to 64 patients being satisfied with their self-image after 2 years. Breaking down these clusters, we can see that in cluster 1 and cluster 2, these groups reported a 28% and a 23% proportion of patients being satisfied with their self-image at baseline. However, in cluster 3, you can see that this number is less than 1%, and this improves after 2 years. So visualizing this data better, we can see in these different clusters, so for cluster 1 and 2, we noticed a 3 times increase in the proportion of patients who were satisfied in their self-image after 2 years of follow-up. And in cluster 3, this change is much more remarkable, as it's a 65 times increase in the proportion of patients who were satisfied with their self-image. However, it's key to note that although cluster 3 were the most responsive to surgery, overall, they had a lower proportion of patients who were normalized or satisfied with their self-image compared to the other 2 clusters. We then use what's called a random forest model, which enables us to use variables to accurately forecast and predict both baseline and post-operative self-image status. So a challenge we ran into was due to the imbalance in patient numbers across the clusters in baseline. So as you can see here, and as I pointed out earlier, cluster free, we had less than 1% of patients being satisfied with the self-image. And this is an issue because cluster free consisted of the majority of patients. So for the baseline, we analyzed the cohort as a whole to minimize bias. And here are the results. So the factors that were most important in predicting self-image at baseline were as follows. So we had ODI, age at surgery, VAS back pain, RSA, and SF36 social functioning, and our model predicted this with 86% accuracy. We then looked to predict improvement in self-image. So looking at patients who were initially unsatisfied with self-image, who then went on to become satisfied with their self-image, and we identified 617 patients who fit this criteria. So looking at cluster 1, we saw that the first radiographical parameter to appear is major coronal Cobb angle, which ranked 5th. Cluster 2, old moderate patients, lumbar cervical curve was the strongest radiological parameter, ranking 4th overall. And the story is a bit different with cluster 3. We saw that radiological variables generally ranked lower for this cluster, and major Cobb angle being the first variable to appear, the first radiological variable to appear, and it came in at 10th place. So in general, we can see that radiological and radiographical parameters ranked lower than patient-reported outcomes. And this is summarized in this table, where we can see that the majority of the model importance, variable importance, is in the patient-reported outcomes, which consists of around 60% of the decision-making in this model, with radiological and radiographical parameters consisting of around 30% compared to the patient-reported outcome measures. So to summarize, ASD significantly impacts self-image across all ages, with 87% of patients reporting unacceptable self-image at baseline. And while 61% of patients achieve normalization of self-image post-surgery, function, pain, and mental health are stronger determinants for self-image than radiographical deformity. As we saw in cluster 3, older and more disabled patients experience poorer baseline self-image and greater improvements, but lower overall normalization rates compared to the other clusters. So these findings tell us that there needs to be a more holistic approach for ASD treatment. We need to address not only the radiographical parameters, not only the structural correction, but we also need to look at a functional and psychological outcomes of the patients. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
Thank you. I'm Donald O'Donoghue, retired. I love that paper.
Thank you.
The exam question is, because I remember watching colleagues and watching my trainers 40 years ago consenting patients. And it was very mechanical based on the surgeon's intuition and the x-ray. How are you going to get this tool into kind of surgical decision-making and recommendations?
Could you repeat your question?
So how will this approach be embedded in how the surgeon thinks as they're talking to the patient?
I'm not too sure about that clinically, but fortunately we have Slayman Haddad and Mr. Morgan Jones here who helped me mentor me on this paper to help answer that question.
Thank you, Chuck, for the presentation. So, of course, well, in idiopathic scoliosis, we always focused on the self-image as a driver for surgery. And actually, in the young coronal population, we thought that it will behave the same, that self-image would be the main responsive. However, we found out that self-image was worst off in the old, severely impaired patient, and it had nothing to do with radiology, actually. It was a lot to do with their own functioning. And this is the take-home message, that actually self-image is very important in the elder population, but has nothing to do with surgery. It has to do with their day-to-day function more than the radiographic parameter. And if we can improve that, most probably they will be feeling self-confident, and that will ultimately improve our outcomes. So this is the message that we are trying to convey with this presentation. And hopefully we'll try to convey that to the patient themselves. Yeah.
But isn't that what it consolidates? I agree, it's a great study. And it consolidates what we say, isn't it? It's not the X-ray that you're trying to demonstrate is better.
Yeah.
So the patient is exactly what your findings are suggesting.
So this is the clinical insight we had, and these are the numbers to prove that, I think. Yeah.
Agree. Thank you.
Do you get a psychologist involved?
Say again?
Do you get a psychologist involved in seeing your patients?
We normally do not have this as a standard of care, but obviously we are detecting patients having like depression or lots of other issues with their day-to-day functioning. And whenever we detect them, we do suggest they see a psychologist prior to surgery, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just in response to that question about psychologists, if you go to some of the major ASD centres internationally, they'll build a psychologist into the MDT. So it's something that should be part of the process.
Absolutely, absolutely.
One quick question, because we're running.
Suleiman, is SRS-22, is it the best to assess the psychological burden in self-image?
Can I suggest we take this question out later on, please, because we're really short of time. Please go and answer.
Obviously not. As a short question. Yeah, as a short answer, yeah.
Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we invite the next speaker, Sulaiman Haddad? So I would like to introduce Sulaiman Haddad. He's the best paper winner from BritSpine2024. So welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. So it's great for me to be back at BritSpine after Nottingham 2016, and I would like to thank BritSpine and Eurospine for the kind invitation. So as you know, as you have heard already from Mr. Ashwani, that this is part of this newly established initiative from Eurospine, in which the USAB ambassador, in this case, Kharko Khalme, has kindly invited me to come to BritSpine and present this paper to you. And this is the first edition, and BritSpine was actually the first host to take on this initiative, and hopefully it will extend to other national meetings. So Eurospine has kindly covered the travel expenses, and BritSpine has waived the registration cost, and I believe it will be done the same way around in Copenhagen again. And I hope you enjoyed the show. So this is aimed at improving the international collaboration, both at the level of members and societies, and to improve the work within Europe in general. So I would like to start by presenting this clinical scenario, which many of you will find familiar. So meet Lisa, a 33-year-old female, very active, with no spinal concern, who has just got married and is planning her family life. And she has come to our outpatient clinic with this very strong clinical question. When should I get my surgery done? Is it prior to getting pregnant, after my kids settle, after I retire? And Lisa's question actually addresses one of the most challenging issues in managing thoracolumbar curves. So on the one hand, surgery at her age would mirror surgery done in adolescence, and therefore we can even stop at L3. However, if we delay surgery, that would increase her chances of having pelvic fixation due to degenerative changes and structural changes taking place on the lumbosacral curve. So to address Lisa's question, we need to explore what we call the waterfall effect. So this refers to a crucial turning point related to age, where the necessity for pelvic fixation shifts from unlikely to mandatory, increasing the surgical morbidity and impacting quality of life of patients. So to investigate this, we conducted the retrospective study using our prospective database of adult spinal deformity. We analyzed patients having thoracolumbar curves greater than 45 degrees, surgically treated in adulthood, with over 2 years of follow-up. We obviously excluded all patients having prior surgeries or non-idiopathic curves. So our study included 240 patients with an average age of 52. Of these, 48 required pelvic fixation and index surgery, while 52% did not. Notably, 4 patients, or 3%, needed surgical revision with pelvic fixation at an average follow-up of nearly 4 years. So as expected, patients needing pelvic fixation were older, leading to an increased comorbidities and higher BMI. This surgery also took 50% longer, had nearly 3 times the blood loss, involved 3 additional fusion levels, and had 3 to 9 times more complications, including proximal junctional kyphosis and pseudoarthrosis. So surprisingly, patients showed similar coronal curves in both the main and lumbosacral curve. However, obviously, sagittal balance was significantly worse in the pelvic fixation group, both in absolute figures and also in gap score parameters. So we observed comparable correction of the main curve with spontaneous normalization of the non-operated coronal and sagittal lumbosacral curve. And although the sagittal balance did improve with surgery, it remained inferior in the pelvic fixation group. So binary regression models confirm that both age and preoperative sagittal balance in the form of RSA angle were independent risk factors for pelvic fixation. And the significance is quite evident with this example. So a 55-year-old lady would have 10 times the risk of needing pelvic fixation when compared to a 25-year-old. And a 75-year-old will have 46 times that risk. So the cutoff points for age and RSA angle were determined to be 53 and 20 degrees respectively, with an area under the curve of nearly 0.85. With these cutoff, age was highly sensitive in detecting the need for pelvic fixation, 88%, while sagittal balance proved to be very specific. So combining these two factors revealed an almost perfect linear regression or correlation, as you can see here, with only 9% of the patient without these risk factors needing pelvic fixation, while 91% of those with both risk factors requiring it. And in fact, 57% with just one risk factor needed pelvic fixation. And what was also worth noting is that revision after the index surgery followed the same trend. Finally, this scatter plot illustrates the decisive nature of age. So as you can see, below 53 years of age, almost all patients are well aligned in the sagittal parameters, and those that are not are quite the exception. And in this age group, you are 91% of the times right not to fix them to the pelvis, and you'll only regret it in up to 2% of the cases. And here is the other way around. So if you are above 53 years of age and you have an RSA above 20, you are 91% of the time right when you do fix them to the pelvis, and you'll regret it in up to 14% of the time when you do not fix them to the pelvis. And there remains a group where age is above 53, RSA is below 20, where nearly 43% of the population did not need pelvic fixation. And this is where patient's function and MRI scan will provide us with the valuable insight. So in conclusion, we have identified this waterfall represented here by the Kaplan-Meier curve of the surgical survivalship without pelvic fixation. So patient navigated rather smoothly up until the age of 40, where something happens and they start deviating from this line. And if they do not get their surgery done by age of 53, they go down this slippery slope with an increased tendency of needing pelvic fixation, and it only stabilizes at age of 80, where the need for pelvic fixation drops down again. So the lingering question here is whether surgery done before the age of 40 will protect these patients, or at least would alter this natural progression. So thank you all for your attention.
Questions? Are we stumped with science?
Was Lisa happy with the operation? Did the first patient you show, was that her x-rays?
She did have her surgery done 2 months ago, actually.
Okay, good. And she's happy with it?
She's happy. Good. So before pregnancy.
So your dictum would be anybody above 53 who has a curve very likely should, because you said there is a 14% chance, which is less than 1 in 5, who would need pelvic fixation otherwise.
So I mean, we have been doing lots of research on finding out when we can stop without going to the pelvis. And the two main risk factors are age and sagittal alignment. Yeah. So when they are off sagittally, what we have been doing was actually going down to the pelvis. We then analyzed patient population stopping at L4 or L5. And again, analyzed the disc disease and so on and so forth. And these are other things to take into consideration, mainly in the ones that do not have bad alignment to start with. Yeah. So, and this is not prospectively done. This is analyzing the way we have done surgery so far and analyzing our results with what we have done so far. And it actually confirms it in a way.
Okay, but with a retrospective study, can we make a very strong recommendation on that?
So we can explain how we have been doing surgery, and this is the information that we are now giving to the patient. So we are saying that obviously the need for pelvic fixation does increase with age, and there seems to be this critical tipping point at the age of 53. Yeah.
Okay. Jaakko?
Yeah, thank you. I'm Jarkko Halme from BritSpine and from Finland. Thank you, Sleiman, very much for your very nice presentation. This is really helping a guy like me who is dealing with the ASD patients in an everyday practice. Based on your data, can I also say that I should, or I could wait with the operation until the age 53 and then just fuse them straight to the pelvis? when they would maintain their function, you know, and then not to get operated too early and then just
This is obviously the debate, no? If we have done surgery prior to 40, are we protecting them on the long run from needing this revision to surgery at the age of 70 or 80 or what have you? And this is the way why we have presented this. I understand your point, but I believe that the research or further follow-up of studies such as the history that is being done by the SRS now will give us the needed question whether or not we are protecting them from having this extension to the pelvis. What we also know is that in patients that have been well operated, and we have stopped before the pelvis, if they needed the surgery down to the pelvis at the age of 60, 70, or whatever, we just are connecting the L3, L4, L5 down to the pelvis, and the aggressiveness of surgery itself is less, and they are able to better tolerate them than the ones needing T2 to pelvis straight from the start.
Thank you. Last
one quick question.
I've got a few questions. Alex Gibson, Stamel. Very nice presentation. Thank you very much. A couple of questions. I think it might not be quite right unless you've got the data to show that an extension to the pelvis, having previously had a fusion to L3 or L4, is more simple and straightforward. Certainly from the pediatric point of view, there's some evidence that actually it's very much more difficult and there's just as much bleeding and more problems than the primary surgery. Second question is, your fixation to the pelvis, what were the criteria that surgeons used and what were the methods that they used to fix to the pelvis? Because I'm sure there's quite a bit of difference between what one surgeon would do and what the other one would do. And the third question is, are you sure, or is there a difference, there must be I think, between the patients in their 50s who weren't offered surgery in their 30s versus those patients who had surgery in their 30s. So the two groups are not directly comparable, are they, for sure?
They are not.
Just appreciate your comments on that.
So just going back to the first one, we are actually doing a comparative studies with the one needing pelvic fixation from the start, whereas the ones that are needing an extension to the pelvis, and there seems to be less bleeding, less surgical complications, and so on and so forth, as long as the first part was properly done. So we are not comparing Harrington rods, we are just comparing ones having 3D implants. So this is to answer the first question. With regards to the second question, the vast majority of surgeons within our group use traditional iliac screws. They do not use sacroiliac S2AI or any other things. And we did not have significant failure at the lower, so the distance junctional failure is less than 2%. And with regards to the third thing, obviously the adult spinal deformity is a very heterogeneous group of patients. And as already said in the previous presentation, we have roughly like 3 main clusters. So the ones up to the age of 40, 50, which are coming with the non-treated idiopathic scoliosis, presenting to you with a different set of concerns. And then the ones that have come after the age of 50 that might have been an idiopathic scoliosis, and they're actually coming for the lumbosacral curve that is now causing their main issues. So pain, dysfunction, sagittal malalignment, radicular pain, and all of this sort. And comparing both populations is not right. And this is why now we are focusing on doing the cluster comparison rather than the en-bloc comparison between patients. And you're absolutely right on that.
That's very helpful, thank you. My view is that the decision-making process around adult deformity is not just based on data. The data can help you, but the basis of your decision-making is your discussion with the patient.
Exactly.
What they want to do and what their aims are.
And this is providing the tools for giving them information. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Actually, sorry, we're running over. Sorry. So we're going to break now. We'll come back at 11:30. We go into the 2 separate paper sessions in this exchange room.